I've been in practice now for 30 years, and thank you for having me. And excited to be starting out. So, you want to start with Lily?
Hi guys, I'm a lead chief. I'm a sophomore here at Alvernia. Play two sports here. I'm track here, play football here. Today I'm representing myself and BSU, so I think Mike look forward to represent you guys. Um, yeah, what's BSU? Actually, cool.
Hi there, thank you for having me. My name is Sharif El-Gogari, people call me Rocky. Ex-Alvernia student, a Temple graduate, and I am coming here on behalf of Active Minds. And Molly, thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being at this event. I am the founder and creator of what was a nonprofit, but is now a for-profit nonprofit called I'm Happier Alive, which is a clothing brand, supported message that is supposed to help connect and raise awareness on mental health and create a positive light and positive spin to that. While doing that, getting to meet and talk to a ton of people. And the mission of my brand is to get money and then allocate it back to communities that deal with mental health issues. That goes from like small kids in underprivileged areas to people dealing with homelessness to people actually like getting treatment and things of that sort. So I've had the brand now for about 5 or 6 months, and I'm really glad to be here and happy to have all the support I have. So I'm coming from that. So, thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Andre Samuel. I'm a grad student and I am one of the counseling interns in the Health and Wellness Center. I love what I do. I love doing things like this and being able to talk to people about mental health because it is so important. In my free time, I love to research mental health topics, particularly topics relating to minority cultures, women, Asian Americans, African Americans. I love to research data that pertains to counseling young boys and how to make sure that men stay mentally healthy. Other than that, I'm very thrilled to be here, and I'm excited that we can all learn and share a little bit about ourselves with each other.
All right, so let's get started with our first question. So I'm going to pose it to just the group, and you guys can jump in where you feel comfortable. Does anyone feel comfortable sharing, why you got involved in mental health?
Sure. So growing up, I often felt like I was very panicked and like sad a lot of the time. I definitely cried in the bathroom a lot more than the movies said I would, so that was kind of strange. And then I found out when I went to college I had anxiety and depression and PTSD. So I kind of was like, all right, how can I deal with this? And I went to see a college counselor, and it changed my entire life. And obviously I'm not a perfect person, but I'm happy to say that I'm a lot healthier than I was before. And it was such a transformative experience going through the counseling process that I wanted to make it my life's goal to help other people transform in ways that are important to them too.
All right, I'll go next. So my personal experience with mental health, similar to Andre's, kind of dates back to like me being a young person thinking that, everything's fine and, I'm just having a bad moment, and then those moments start to accumulate. And as I became a young man and a young adult, I started realizing and learning the proper phrasing to a lot of that. I don't have all the expertise due to our education, but I also then went for the first time to see like a school counselor. I was in high school when it happened. And at the time I was a D1 recruited athlete, and school and finance and all this stuff began to pile up. I partially tore my ACL my senior year of high school. I lost my first scholarship, and I felt for the first time like a full plummet in my life. And since that moment, since receiving help, I've dealt with things like trying medication and it not working or it working, learning more about my own personal mental health. But that experience allowed me to get to a place where I started acknowledging it in every person I met. I started realizing like having conversations with people that were a little better than surface level, talking about your emotions, talking about how shitty things can be, how like you can kind of collaborate and be around each other and creating safe spaces. And once I saw how much that meant to me in my life, I started to push that into the lives of people around me. And then to go back into my brand, it kind of stems from the phrase "I'm happier alive." I had people in my life who struggled with suicide. I had more than one person in my life attempt suicide, and as someone who became a positive person, because I had my own, hills and valleys, I was able to be a positive person to them. And through a phrase like that, I would text it to them, I would write it on hats, and I would say it to my friends, and it became something more powerful than just like a couple words. So unfortunately, one of the people that I just spoke about attempted suicide, and we don't talk anymore, but it showed the value of that phrase, and then that's how I was able to bring that into my life. So I just want to continue being a positive person and trying to just promote awareness for men, and especially men, because I am a man, but all women and creeds and colors. That's my experience.
My experience with mental health, so around my 12th grade year, I just began to be sad for, I'm not sure what reason. This occurred also during my freshman year of college, and I didn't know what also the reason was until I started looking up the symptoms, and I looked up and it was anxiety. So that's my experience with it.
Thank you guys. So Molly talked a little bit about prioritizing mental health, and why would you guys say that's important? And more importantly, how do you do that when things seem most stressful, right? Because we say that we should prioritize mental health, but yet we feel the worst when everything's piling up.
I feel like it's important to prioritize your mental health in college, because I think we all know college only gets harder, our courses only get more rigorous. So just finding the time to manage both of the two is very important. I believe if you're studying while you're stressed, those two don't correlate at all. So just finding the time to manage both of them, and you can do this by simply turning off your phone when you're stressed, or drinking more water, or making daily goals, anything that help make yourself feel more comfortable with your day by day experience. So that's how you prioritize.
So creating a rhythm before you even get there.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's important to prioritize mental health, I think, because it affects all the other areas of our lives. I mean, if your mental health isn't doing so well, that could lead to trouble sleeping, could lead to increased stress levels, which means not as much of an appetite, which means not as much energy for things like studying, staying engaged in class. So it really does bleed into all areas of your life, and it also affects the environment around you. I mean, if your mental health isn't doing so great, it's bound to affect your relationship with your loved ones. So in a way, I feel like prioritizing your mental health is both a selfish act and a good way, because you're taking care of yourself and your own life. And it's also a selfless act because you're ensuring that you're healthy enough to be there and care for your community and the people that you love the most in your life. And in terms of how it can be done during stressful times, even I struggle with that. Like, I definitely struggle with keeping up a routine and getting into a rhythm. But I just try to find moments where I can tell myself I'm doing my best. I succeeded here, I faltered a bit here, and that's okay, because I'm doing what I can in the moment to just get through that moment. And I think it's important to do that. I think it's important to tell ourselves that it's okay if we drop the ball a little bit, as long as we just keep things moving.
I really, so kind of piggyback off what Andre and Malik said, they both kind of brought up the word like being selfish or selfless, and how that a lot of times relates to people with mental health, issues. My brother was saying is you can't pour from an empty cup, so you need to prioritize your mental self. You need to prioritize your own well-being. That's ahead of everything else going on in your life. That could be friendships, because if you're not handling yourself correctly, you're giving people a half-assed effort, and you're giving yourself a half-assed life. So to take the time as a young person to learn about yourself, to educate yourself at an age where you are very valuable, you can become anyone you want to become. However, that's a process, and a lot of that comes with education, and a lot of that comes with being selfish, taking like he was saying, taking time out of your day to be like, I'm gonna set reminders, I'm gonna do positive things for myself. I'm not gonna, go to my friend's house because they asked me to, because you're tired, go to sleep. And when you establish yourself as an important human being, you allow yourself to feel valued, and when you're valued, you just put that onto the people around you. And like you said, the more you care about your mental health, the more that you can put that onto other people. Now you can help them in a place that you become. Like, even right now, I have like this quartz piece of rock that anytime I'm like nervous, like they both talked about it, I have diagnosed anxiety, but like this rock, like I read about it, it's quartz, it's meant to like stabilize people. I'm like, that might be a bunch of BS, but like having things like that just help me kind of tone my life back down and like remind me I'm always as best as I can be in control of it.
Yeah, I want to just reiterate what Andre said a little bit about, your mental health may affect your sleep and your eating, but I also really want to highlight that it's really important that if you are tired or not eating well, then you're more likely to feel off and things will be more magnified. And so it works both ways, especially when you said, there is a saying in addictions, right? That's one of the things you need to check. It's the first thing you do is, am I hungry? Am I tired? Because if you're any of those things, you are going to be more likely to give in. So to that point, guys, how can we promote a healthier environment regarding mental health on campus for all students?
So I think a lot of promoting mental health is about talking about it as a necessity as opposed to a luxury. Like schools will say gym class is mandatory, like it's mandatory that you take care of your physical body, but I'm not really sure how much progress has been made by making it mandatory to take care of your mental health as well. If you don't go to the gym, you become sluggish, you lose muscle mass, you're not able to carry as much. And in the same way, if you don't take care of your mental health, your mind becomes sluggish, you're not able to handle the daily stressors of life. And I feel like a way to make mental health more prominent and to promote it better on campus is to promote it not as something where you only focus on it if you're feeling bad, but something where you can focus on it even if you're feeling okay, and you can focus on it to make you better, not just bring you from like a low point to a normal point. But you can actually go from feeling normal to feeling great just by taking care of your mental health. And I feel like if it was promoted in that sense, people would see that mental health isn't just for people who are struggling and suffering, but it's for people who are like doing perfectly okay.
Another note, so I went to Temple University after I went to Alvernia, and I didn't really know about networks of organizations and groups that were able to help me. And it's a weird story, but I ended up doing Big Brother, Big Sister, which is where you go to in Philly, you go to underconference schools and you be a big brother. And through that process, I actually met people who became big brothers to me in the organization. So number one thing about how you can, make it a healthier place on campus is to just keep getting involved in things and keep promoting it and keep centering yourself around helpful people. And in regards to expanding how universities can do this, a lot of how people are talking about social change and social movements, there are petitions and things going on every day. If you feel like there's not enough advocacy in your school or in your program, write a petition, get signatures, get people to sign it, put it on someone's desk, and then that reallocation, something might happen. People talk about a lot with police issues, and a lot of that has to do with the right people going to these incidents, and mental health experienced people are some of the top people who are there, who should be there to de-escalate these situations and keep promoting those types of organizations to get funding. So if you see anything online or you want to write your own thing, keep signing those petitions, keep talking about it, because in all of that is how change can become prominent in your own school.
To that, what are some of the ways coaches and athletic staff can create a healthy and supportive environment for learning students and athletes?
All right, so I answer this. They can create a more healthy and supportive environment for us. Just like you said, just talking about it. I think student athletes go through it the most, and sometimes it goes unnoticed because we may not want to talk about it. So just being more vocal about it, even if it's even if it's not about the sport we're playing, just 15 minutes to talk about our day and how our day went and how it can affect us. I know my coach Clark, he does this. He has an open door policy. So whenever I'm going through it, I know that's the first person I call. It's easy to contact them. So making open door policies for the student athletes can be very helpful.
To speak on that as well, so I was a student athlete here at Alvernia and then at Temple. And I suffered a TBI, which is a traumatic brain injury, and I wasn't able to play sports. Well, I graduated, so I couldn't do it anymore, and I wasn't very good at that point either. But to speak on, what can coaches and people in the athletic departments do is to carry on what you said, just make it feel like a safe environment for, because at first a college athlete is a student, and then you're not only a student, but you might have a job. And then on top of a job, you might have 25 hours of practices. And then you have lectures and organizations you're involved in. There's so many more opportunities to drain yourself in those positions. And I think creating a sense of empathy for a coach or someone involved in the athletic department is super important because, famous athletes are finally now, it's 2020, starting to talk about, hey, I was depressed in the offseason. I'm an Eagles fan, but like Dak Prescott, Cowboys quarterback, he was like, hey, my brother passed away and that affected me. And making that a normalized conversation and just creating a space where people can actually be human because they're not just athletes, you're a human being. Just like if someone's, you're more than your first describing word. If you're someone in the LGBT community, you're still a human being. If you're a woman, you're not just a woman, you're a human being. And creating that sense of empathy all the time, especially for athletes in college where like, it can feel like it's a job on top of a job on top of school, which feels like a job. And you just need to be healthier there. And I think schools are starting to do that, and I would like to see their continued growth.
So there's a phrase saying, you're a human being, not a human doing. And that's how we treat ourselves.
I like what you said about like creating space for open conversation. A lot of times in sports, we impress upon athletes these traits of aggressiveness, competitiveness, suck it up, stay strong, keep going, don't let him see you sweat. And I feel like that kind of language, inadvertently creates an area where people can't have mental health issues, where they can't, go to practice and be vulnerable, where they can't go to practice and feel like it's okay to come out to their teammates or, whatever. And I feel like promoting a healthier, supportive environment for sports teams is a lot about coaches and captains and leaders of the team initiating those conversations and letting people know that it's okay to not, keep it together all the time. It's okay to just get through practice the best that you can and not stay strong 100% of the time. So I definitely think that leaders stepping up and having those conversations would help a lot.
Also, like if you're a leader on a team, if you're a very vocal person, be that person to open up to other people who may not be as much vocal. I know certain people on my team, they're more vocal than I am. And I know if I ever need somebody, I can call them because they're a more vocal person. So if you're a leader on the team, I should be vocal and open up.
Yeah, for sure. Like leaders set the tone for what the team's like. Like I did track when I was an undergrad and I got in front, I was pretty good. But one of the captains on the team actually used a lot of language that was like very derogatory. And I loved doing track, but it actually made me quit because I did not feel welcome like at all. And I never told my coach about it. And that was like my freshman year. And then my sophomore year, my coach finally asked about it. And then I told him, and he was like, if you had just, we had just talked about it, I would have kicked that guy off the team so fast. So I definitely think you're right. I definitely think it's important for leaders of the team to be vocal and use their vocal powers like for good instead of for evil.
And to add on that, just one last thing, it's like if you do have any places in your life where like you don't think people are properly being held accountable, you're not a snitch for upholding a certain amount of respect for you and others around you. I know like you were talking about in the athletic world, like I would feel like I'm the devil if I called someone out who's a leader or a star player or whatever. No matter what aspect of your life it is completely valid for you to hold people accountable. And if anything, if they're not gonna if they can't have an original conversation, they should not be in those places of power. It's like you see it in the news all the time, but like we have to continually challenging the people who are in charge of us or who are, higher up than us to be as accountable as we hold ourselves.
So what are some of the stereotypes of mental illness and mental health within minority groups that you feel should be addressed? And how can we change it?
So, I know the African American community seeking counseling and like talking openly about mental health issues is still not super accepted. I called my mom once and told her that I was on medication for anxiety, and she would think that I told her that I was dealing hard drugs or something. There was like a lot of crying, a lot of, just like concern. And I think a lot of that concern comes from just not knowing that mental health affects everyone. So, and even with the different people that I've talked to in my program and in, private practices and whatnot, individuals who are in minority groups, they oftentimes feel like they can't be really open about their mental health illnesses. And I feel like we can change that by having media normalize it. Like I don't know if anybody else watches Grey's Anatomy. Love it. We're like 16 seasons deep. Yeah, there we go. She's one of us. And there's a lot of great work on that. You're talking about mental illness from the perspective of women, African, Asian Americans, LGBT.
Also, freaking Nick got rabbit guts in my shoe and it made my sock wet. So like,
Picture of normality. That's okay.
Growing up, I was always told, don't look for change, be the change. And just going back to the old question you asked, just being vocal about it. Us being here at this panel is it's a change right now. So a lot of the stereotype is that African Americans, we should go through it and just don't show it because, and I don't think that's fair. We all equal, we're all human. So if we're going through it, I believe that we should be able to show it and that we should be able to talk to somebody. That's also a stereotype for African American men in today's society, that we're just supposed to be a superhero and act like nothing matters when honestly it does. So just being open to speak about it is a big stereotype for, I know, minorities.
I think both of them hit on a big part of that. I think specifically some other, like, to name a stereotype would be, especially in the masculine community, there's like toxic masculinity going on all the time. And then it's a room full of women right now, but then that projects onto how they treat women and, them upholding themselves to being the stoic, mean kind of guy instead of talking about their emotions, then it reacts to the environment. So a lot of these men who are dealing with these pent-up aggression and rage and all these things that accumulate, and that's especially true in populations where it's lower income or higher stress levels, higher pressure levels, which unfortunately is a lot of the Black and people of color communities. So those people, then you see them outraged and you see them have pent-up aggression and then react to women and people in their lives. So getting rid of that stereotype that men need to be these stoic, I got my life together stuff. One thing I've talked about girls, I'm so envious of the body positivity, supporting each other all the time. I wish guys could do that. I wish my friends would comment on my Instagram oh, it's so cute, love your shoes, LOL, can't wait to see you, girly. That aspect of it, I'm so jealous of because it feels like there's a community, and that's why I can see how women are able to gather up all these movements and get so many people together, and there's an empowerment to it. With that, women, y'all also have some stuff to work on, but I'm not the person to talk about that. But we all can, just be aware of the stereotypes that we fit into, and then how we can try to change the mold. Thanks.
I have a quick question to go off of that. How do you think we can address that on campus? Does that start in the classroom, on the field, just in the dorm rooms with each other? How can we address that as an Alvernia community?
Address what in particular?
Toxic masculinity, and to really reinforce positive mental health within these demographics.
Very carefully. Don't piss anyone off too much.
Carefully, and also speaking on masculinity, I feel like more men should be involved, and not even just just groups, more groups. I feel like a lot of groups here at Alvernia is women-based, and that's no problem at all. But it's a lot of people saying that more men should be involved. So I think that could be a big part, just at Alvernia, for sure.
So the APA, correct me if I'm wrong, the American Psychological Association recently came out with some guidelines on how better to counsel individuals who are dealing with toxic masculinity. And there are 4 hallmarks of masculinity: aggression, competitiveness, dominance, and I think maybe being stoic. But anyway, the point is, in my research, I found that there is a lot of discussion on how best to counsel men. When we talk about toxic masculinity, we're talking about men engaging in activities to prove their manhood, because I think as a culture, we set these standards for men to attain that are very difficult. I mean, if you look at Marvel movies, if you're not 6 feet tall and like super jacked and very handsome, does that not make you a superhero? So what'll happen is men will see that and feel inadequate in certain areas, and they'll try to overcompensate in other areas by being additionally competitive or additionally aggressive. And I feel like one way to change that on campus would be the creation of spaces for guys to hang out that also respect the fact that some men don't feel comfortable communicating with words. I mean, when we talk about masculinity, it always seems to eventually get to guys need to be more vocal about their emotions. They need to be more vulnerable. And I definitely think that's true, but I think it's also important to recognize that there are other ways to express vulnerability and to communicate emotions. So maybe a talking group isn't what guys need on campus. Maybe once a month, they just need like an axe throwing group to get, some aggression out, or take them on to the woods, have them chop wood, shoot the fish with the thing, check under the car for,
Yes.
But yeah, just creating groups where men can feel comfortable and know that it's okay to express their emotions in a way that's healthy, but also in a way that is comfortable and natural for that individual.
I'm gonna stop, I'm gonna jump in here.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
So this is where it gets tricky, right? Because right there, we think that, here the axe throwing and so forth. And I love that, but women need it too, right? Let's recognize women have trouble with anger because we've been conditioned that we aren't supposed to be angry, we're supposed to be sweet. And so we swallow, right? And men, also, now are afraid because they don't want to be abusive with their anger, right? So there's a fine line there too. So it really is a cultural issue. It's like we say with racism, it's in the air we breathe, right? So because I grew up in a very sort of 1950 household where I have 3 older brothers, and my mother used to joke and she used to say to everybody, "Oh, thank goodness it wasn't the other way around, that I didn't have 3 girls, because I would have never survived," right? And that was sort of, she thought it was funny, but there was messaging there, right? But yet it's okay for girls to be dramatic during their middle school years. But what happens to boys, right? They have to go to the bathroom and cry and stall because whereas we may gossip about how girls are dramatic, boys are still having the same hormonal changes, but yet we don't allow them any space. So understand, again, we're all human beings. And so we all have the gamut, especially when we don't know how to regulate our hormones yet. And so women also need axe throwing, is my point. Because we also need to get comfortable with anger. Right? As a culture, we're not comfortable with anger.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, to speak on back to the original question rather than specifically toxic masculinity and gender specific, emotions. The question was asked about like what can we do on campus, and a couple cool things I've seen at other universities. I've been lucky with my branch to talk to people at different schools. So the way we have like mandatory drinking seminars that people have to go to, or freshmen have to go to a speaker, or have to have courses, online courses that educate them on stereotyping, on changing that cultural air, making that from a systemic thing, from freshmen up as they grow, that these aren't, things that we have on campus that are okay. Having that sense of accountability. And I do want to shout out Professor Ali Blair. She is FYS teacher here at Alvernia. I'm pretty sure she teaches yoga too. But I got the experience to go to Canada with her with Alvernia. And I know in some of her FYS classes, they talk about freshman year and mental health and how it affects freshmen and creating routines and these positive, things going on in your life. So I think, FYS classes, even though I failed mine here in Alvernia, that's a very important place where you can create that kind of norm from a classroom, because it's a first year seminar. It's somewhere where someone can say, hey, these are things you're gonna experience. It's normal. Here are all your resources. Here are all these education points. Here are all these groups and people that support you once you succeed. And I think creating that from a beginner's point, molds it to be a long-term change.
So this is a good one. How can you maintain your own mental health while supporting your friend? And when does it start to cross the line?
I'll take point on this, gentlemen. This is like all I did throughout COVID. I got so many phone calls about people having like mental breakdowns. So maintaining your own mental health while supporting your friend. I think a good place to start is accepting the emotion that you feel. Like, it is okay to get annoyed if your friend calls you crying on the phone and you've had like a really good day and now you gotta deal with that. It is totally okay to be annoyed. It's totally okay to not feel like doing it. And it's totally okay to want to do it and to want to help them. I feel like a lot of people feel guilty for not being quote unquote the perfect patient person, but that's not realistic. It's okay to be a little bit annoyed. It's not gonna do it every once in a while. So maintaining your own mental health, I think, goes into checking in with where you are and being honest with yourself and with your friend about what you can handle in the moment. So whenever I have something heavy to talk about with my friends, I always ask them, do you have the emotional capacity to hear this right now? Because they're busy and they're people too. Sometimes they're super stressed and they cannot handle my whatever drama is going on in my life. And that's okay. I have other ways of handling those emotions and dealing with them. But I think it's important to check in with myself, check in with yourself first and be honest with how you're feeling. And when does it start to cross the line? I think it depends on the person. For some people, it crosses the line as soon as they start to question whether it's crossing the line. For someone like me, if I start to feel stressed or anxious just from listening to what's going on with them, then I know that I need to distance myself a little bit and recover a little bit so that I can recharge myself and be a good friend and be there for them more. But I think it really just depends on the person and knowing yourself to know when it crosses the line.
This question is kind of hard for me. Me being a social worker, it's my job to help, and I'm all open ears for all of my friends. So I really don't have a lot of all the answers, but I can say when it starts to cross the line when you can't even control your own mental health or your own mental capacity. If you feel overwhelmed and a friend calls you, that's when it starts to cross the line. But I always do recommend, if you can take it, just even if you don't have the answers, just be an open ear. Always be an open ear for your friends because you never know. So.
In regards to your own mental health while supporting your friend, it kind of goes back to how we were talking about being selfish, and how that's okay. I was joking around with them before we started about how I'd rather give someone one honest, full, authentic, help session or ear than half-assing it 3 times. And I think in the long run, your friends and the people you care about will really start to acknowledge, like, hey, all right, yeah, this person can't always just be like, my ear whenever I want, but like when they do it, it's valuable and it's something that means a lot to me. So my brother, for example, is an RA, and he was telling me that like if he's not really going to actually help his residents, it's not appropriate for him to meet with them. And I'd rather have someone authentically do something for me or help me and be the best version of themselves when I need it, than for you to just be like, yeah, because then you're already drained yourself and you're just adding on to that whole pile. So it's okay to, say, hey, I'm not the best person for this. And also being aware giving someone resources or being like, if you're in a friend group, maybe know that like, hey, I'm not the guy to talk to today, or the girl or the person, but maybe you should talk to so-and-so, and make them feel valued, but reallocate the time and the energy they need if you're not the one to have. It's okay to be like, hey, I know you're going through a lot, and a lot of times the issue is you feel bad. You feel like for them it's like the end of the world, and for you, you're an awful friend. These emotions exist past that moment, and if you keep that in mind, and you say, hey, tonight's not the night, or hey, I'm busy. Can we meet up tomorrow for coffee? Can we have like a Zoom, like schedule a time to make them feel valued when you can like reassess yourself? I think doing that can help keep you in a much healthier place.
So do you do this before the conversation starts or after? Just after they had the conversation with you?
If someone comes to me and they're like, Rocky, man, my life's this, and let's say I'm on my way here, I'm on the car, I'm driving, it's raining, I'm not having a good mental health day. I say, listen, I really feel for you. Today is maybe not the best day for me to chat. I'm a little preoccupied. I'm a little, my brain's in other places. I really care about you. Acknowledge them. You know what I mean? Because it's hard, especially for guys. I've seen such a positive. If you're like a guy who has like girl problems or something, if you're like, yo, man, that's valid. Let's talk about this tomorrow. That kind of stuff is very important. So I would do it before they even go into their rant, like what they're really emotionally feeling. And you can have some blanket statements. Hey, take it like kind of like what's your name, partner? I'm allowed to call you, you're a therapist. I feel like just be more professional. You're allowed to say like, hey, did you eat? Hey, did you sleep? Hey, why don't you check off these boxes tonight, and we'll get back into this tomorrow. And I think that still makes you a good friend.
I really want to highlight here because I do think there's a little bit, again, not that it should be, but it is harder for women to do this.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I do a little thing where I've learned for myself that, hell is paved with nice, and kind is something very different, right? And so when someone asks me something, if I'm afraid to say no because I'm worried about what they're going to think about me, how they're going to talk about me, that it's going to change how they look at me, then I'm making a decision based on nice. Because when I'm in a place of kind, I am well rested. I'm nutritionally, like not just truly nutritionally, but like fully all around in a good place. And then I don't have to think about it. And I just automatically am there for them. And that's where I'm coming from, a place of kind. So again, when we have those thoughts like, oh, I have to, or I should, right? We should all over ourselves, right? There's another phrase that I use a lot. Stop shitting all over yourself.
We'll put that on a t-shirt.
Little tricks. Okay, with the current pandemic, there's been a record surge in mental illness within the country. How has COVID affected your mental well-being, and how can you manage to take care of yourself during the pandemic?
Andre, I know you're going to speak.
Go ahead, bro.
I was hoping I would not get called on because I did great during COVID. I got time like off of work and I dove into like my passions and the things that I like to do, like reading, video games, anime, Pokemon.
And we didn't have FOMO.
What?
And we didn't have FOMO, which is a
Fear of
big
missing
stress.
Oh yeah, we didn't have fear of missing out because all the fun was in my bedroom. Like for video games. What was I gonna say? Okay, so how to take care of myself or yourself during the pandemic. So obviously not every day was a walk in the park. I did a lot of hiking. I found out that I love to hike. So the pandemic and quarantining yourself is a great time to try new things because you have no excuses. You literally have nothing going on in your life. So I went outside and I hiked like 8 miles a day. I loved it. I did yoga. I didn't love it, but I still tried, which is important. Actually, let me backtrack a bit. So you can still have things going on in your life during the pandemic and during quarantining. However, as a whole, there's bound to be more time that you can devote to trying new things. And that's kind of what I did during my quarantine time is I used that extra time to do things that I love, which is the point that I'm trying to stumble towards is with the extra time and extra space that we all have quarantining ourselves, it's a great time to figure out what it is that makes you happy and what it is that you're passionate about and dive into it or try to dive into new things.
Personally, I think I had a positive mindset during this whole COVID thing. I know at first when COVID first hit, we were all making jokes about it, getting like we all wanted to go home from school, but then when it really hit, we all got like a little sad and depressed in the house. So, but I've been trying to maintain it the best I could. I think this ties back into the second question you asked us about prioritizing. Self-development was a big thing for me during this COVID. Just YouTube, looking at YouTube videos, how to manage your everyday life, how to schedule a day, daily goals. Like I said, drinking more water, going outside, talking to more friends, just anything that's going to make me feel better. So yeah, I really didn't have a bad outcome of the whole COVID isolation thing.
Since we talked about, how we weren't doing poorly,
Yeah.
I do have friends that did do poorly, and to sort of speak on that a bit is one of the things that a lot of my friends did who were struggling with the pandemic was they relied a lot on technology for that social interaction. So downloading apps like House Party, FaceTiming a lot more. There's an app called Squad that lets you watch Netflix movies together, like as a group. I know that our generation gets criticized a lot for relying on technology, but I know that technology has done a lot for people's mental health during the pandemic, especially in regards to like dating and like seeing friends and talking to family members. We had a birthday party for a great aunt of mine, and we didn't feel comfortable doing it in person, and so we were able to do it on House Party, which was awesome. Obviously, there were some drawbacks to the technology always being present, but that was one of the positives that we could focus on was using it to stay connected.
Well, I think with the social media thing, we also have to be very careful with it because we have a lot of time on our hands. During this pandemic, we had a lot of time on our hands. So you don't want to wake up and the first thing you do is go on social media. There's a lot of negatives on social media, and that could really affect your day. So starting your day off positive, well, during the pandemic at least, starting your day off positive really helped me as well for that.
I had a completely opposite experience with COVID, and I'm just blown away. I am so proud of you guys, but damn, I wish that was me. So step one is I'm a hypochondriac, so I always think I'm dying. So you can imagine that when COVID started, I was in my least pain place I've ever been in my life. I went to the hospital once for a panic attack in probably back in April. It was the beginning of April. I thought I couldn't breathe. I was sure I had it. This was when a lot of data wasn't out yet, and if you kind of heard that if you got COVID, you were going to die. There was a lot of misinformation. There was a lot of negative talk, like they said on social media. So I went to the hospital. I had a doctor there kind of described to me what they knew about COVID at the time, and from that period, I've had the worst night. I remember I thought I couldn't breathe. It turns out I have GERD, which is a stomach issue from having too many alcoholic beverages in college. So thankfully I know that, and I don't have COVID every week. But there was a night that I feel comfortable talking about. It's luckily I live with the greatest human beings, roommates in the world. But I couldn't stop crying. I was having a panic attack. I didn't want to feel like I was weak or weird to my roommates, but my best friend Pete Riley, who also went to Alvernia, came in my room, was like, dude, are you okay? Do you want me to hang out with you? I ended up sleeping on this floor for a night. I'm a 24-year-old man, I kind of have my own business. I'm doing all right, but it can happen to anyone. And so COVID was really difficult for me. And because of COVID, I was able to start a branded stuff, which is really nice, but it took a lot of downs. It took a lot of, I remember I would FaceTime my physician friends every night, but I would try to pick different ones so that they didn't think I was all I didn't want them all to think I was crazy. I was like, oh dude, I'm dying. This has to be the night, KO, get me the ventilator. Oh my God, there's not enough ventilator. So that was so rapid for me in the beginning that I couldn't enjoy myself. I spent half of my days freaking out. And then through what I think a lot of us have talked about is through personal education, through personal reaffirmations of myself, I started keeping a journal of my my life, my habits, my positives, my negatives, and I was able to check in on myself. I started doing online therapy because I stopped going to see my usual therapist. And I just had to find ways again to kind of reinvent a healthy version of myself. But COVID wasn't easy for me, and I know it wasn't easy for a lot of people. My brother got COVID twice. Well, they're calling one the rhino's disease, but he had COVID, he tested positive for it. Luckily, he's a very healthy 17-year-old. But to people that don't think it's real or hoax, like my brother's a D1 recruited athlete. He can go to any school he wants in the country, but he was bedridden for 12 days. He could get to the bathroom, but he couldn't walk around the block for almost a week. Those type of experiences are very real, and it kind of takes that personally happening to someone you know for it to feel like something super important and it to feel like it's a real thing. So kudos to you guys, and I'm gonna take all those things you guys were doing, and hopefully the rest of COVID until everything calms itself down, I can have a much more positive experience.
Also, lastly, for this question, something that got me through COVID personally, is a thing I learned called decompression. So a lot of people don't have somebody to talk to later at night. So what it is 10-minute journaling. You write your wins, your losses of the day, how you felt. Just like you were saying, this 10 minutes nonstop, whatever comes on your mind. And this is basically like telling somebody how your day went, but you just write it on pen and pad. So the next day you could look back at it, oh, I did this better, And it's like a decompressing method. So that's tips for anybody who feel like they're stressed throughout the day. I can try that. It really works.
And for those, I mean, again, I think in the beginning, like I said, people did feel like it was easier because they didn't have the FOMO. But then what I did see in my practice, to your point, was I did see people really hit crisis because, we work on these tools. And then if we're not using them, we lose them. And so, again, one of the things I also just want to point out in this talk is that when I work with people a lot, I have to remind them, our brains will tell us, we just have, when we do X, Y, and Z, then we'll be happy. And what I want everyone to know is we don't get to happy and then we stay there, right? Life is just a constant wave of just emotions, and nothing is stagnant. And our minds want to tell us that it should be. We should be happy. So happiness comes and then it goes. We need to learn to just ride it and not also pathologize it. There's been significant growth in discussion regarding mental illness and mental health in the last decade. How has the world of mental health changed in the last 5 to 10 years? What still needs to change?
I just feel like it's more broad. Like you said, athletes are talking about it now. Actresses is talking about it. So now that they're talking about it, now people are opening up more about it. That's why I'm glad we did this panel. So that's why I think it's changed in the last 5 to 10 years. And what still needs to change? I think the people who judge other people on their mental well-being or their mental health. We still got to get to those people and give them more understanding. That's what needs to change.
So there have been a lot of changes in the past 5 to 10 years, and it's all been happening very quickly. I was never super into social media until a couple years ago, and there wasn't a whole lot going on with mental health and mental health awareness. And now I feel like in the past year, everything is just there's a lot of advocacy for LGBT plus groups. There's a lot of advocacy for women, there's a lot of dialogue about toxic masculinity, and it's all just happening very, very quickly, which on the one hand is great. I think what still needs to change about that, however, is realizing what sources are great sources to get information from and to learn from, and to sort of trust those sources. One of the things that, I'm just an internship, but one of the things that I tell people when I work with them is it's okay to be angry. It's okay to have a moment where you're not perfectly put together, because I feel like a lot of I mean, not even I feel like I know a lot of social media posts that try to talk about mental health, will always talk about being positive, always forgiving, always moving on. And I tell people, like, no, it's okay to be mad. It's okay to stew on it, to give yourself a day to just be quote unquote toxic and to ruminate and just let yourself have that day to just feel the emotion. And I think to sum up, that still needs to change is even though we're learning more, I feel like there's not enough discussion going on about reminding people that they're human and that it's okay to not be perfectly put together all the time.
This is gonna be like a broad world thing, but a lot of people can kind of argue that right now in the world there's a ton of negativity, there's a ton of bad in the world. And I think I've been able through all of this to kind of read between it, create my own feeling. And a reason a lot of this can change is I think empathy in the world is growing. People are starting to care about one another to a point where they're willing to do something about it. We all used to want to, like, I've been at Black Lives protests weekly for the past couple of years ago. I wouldn't have done that because I didn't care enough. And we're at a point now where we're actively, openly caring. People want to know what's up. People want to change. People want to learn. I genuinely met, and however your political views stand, but I've had a bunch of bad political conversations with people who don't see the same way I do. But because I continually be I educate myself and inform the person, I can have conversations. I've seen people change sides. I've seen people change and grow. And these moments and these people exist. And I think we're at a very pivotal time in our lives where not only in the US, but I'm Middle Eastern, but countries all over the world are revolutionizing, caring about one another, stepping up for one another. And I think mental health comes along with that because we're allowed to talk about it. We're allowed to be uncomfortable about it. Everyone feels like when you're by yourself, you can't do anything. But when you have, you empower in numbers. Like the bigger the numbers get, the more all of this can change and get better. And sure, it feels like a negative kind of dip in our history, but it has to be, uncomfortable. It has to be different. It has to have these moments so that there can be a better. And I think we're definitely on the way there. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, all these things are still going to exist, but at a capacity we can talk about and handle, where maybe we don't have to have panels like this because we don't feel like we're talking about it now. Maybe we just have organizations that are doing this stuff. And I really commend organizations that already exist for this because it's only going to get better and get bigger.
Thank you guys so much. You did such an amazing job, Lonnie. Thank you again for moderating. And this portion of the panel, we're going to be having a Q&A. So everyone here you can ask freely. Just as a reminder, our panelists here are amazing. They have been talking about such open things, and I appreciate that so much. However, they do have the right to dismiss any question they are not comfortable with. You can ask any question, but that is up to them on what they choose to answer. But we do encourage openness and having a community discussion. So for anyone on Zoom, you can feel free to put messages in the group chat for us to answer. We'll ask them here. And to start us off, to let everyone get a chance to think about something, I will ask you guys, this was a submitted question, what do you guys do for self-care? You know what self-care is?
Do I do self-care? Never heard of it. Never heard
There
of
you
it.
go. I'll let you start.
So for self-care, I watch horror movies and I play horror video games. And I have this book of short horror stories that I read. So yeah, I like to dive into my favorite genre of media for self-care. And if that's not available, I will light some candles, lie in bed, and watch Netflix. I get very comfy with it.
I'm gonna great. However, I do want to acknowledge my partner talks about me all the time because self-care is a lot more than a bubble bath and candles. Self-care is allocating time for yourself in a day. You kind of talked about you talk about shutting your phone off, existing in yourself, reading something, stimulating your brain. Self-care is anything, honestly, that puts you in a better place than you were before, solely for yourself. And that's probably not a real definition, but it sounded good right there.
That was great.
Yeah, thank you. So anything you can do, for me personally, you went on 8-mile hikes. To me, that sounds like a chore. That sounds great for you. Finding those things that add value and add comfort to your life, do those things. Don't do those things if they're unhealthy. And I will speak to the college community here. Drinking is pretty fun to a point, other things that we might all be doing and rolling up can only be so good or bad for you. So keep in mind that those things may be good for a moment, but they do have their negatives. So you want to do things that are good for you in the long term. So long as you're not killing your body. The gym, I usually was a college athlete, I hated waking up 6 o'clock in the morning. But now that I'm an adult, when I do it for myself, I'm like, dude, I'm important. I went to the gym, I have value now, and I have a much better day. So try to find things that make you feel like you're having a much better day. Also, caffeine tricks you into that sometimes. You don't need a second cup of coffee.
I basically mentioned it already. I like this whole thing about compression method, turning my phone off when I'm feeling overwhelmed or stressed. So that's my form. That's my form of self-care. I'm sorry.
That's what you do. Bonnie, do you have any self-care?
No, I mean, I'm a big believer in really paying attention to what brings you energy. And so, and to constantly check in with yourself, right? So I used to be a really avid exerciser and kickboxer, and I loved it. And in the beginning, for me, as a woman, like I said, it was great to get out my aggression. And at some point, it was stressing me out, showing up every day, and it's like, this is what I do, and people are expecting me, and I have to do it. And it was depleting me. And so I had to pay attention to that when that shifted. And so then I, found other things. But really, for me, it's watching what makes me come alive. And then, I got to put more time there. And that includes people too, people we hang out with, right? They'll either bring us up or bring us down. And being able to really have those few relationships where you really are nourished, but you're not managing them. Again, you're not worried about how they're thinking about you, how you look, you're keeping them happy, but that you're actually truly engaged.
Bonnie, can I ask you a question? How did you what do you do to realize those moments? So I feel in my life so often, I'm I don't know when I need to make a change, and I feel I don't know what needs to happen. How can I, how do you acknowledge yourself so that you can see those types of changes happening in your life?
Well, I mean, sometimes, it does, it's not going to hit you right away, but, when you start to realize that, like I said, I mean, it is, all emotions are normal, right? So it is fine to be sad, but when you have, when those days are starting to pile up, that's when you need to start to take inventory, right? And say, okay, am I sleeping enough? Am I eating right? Where am I off balance? I love when you said that your brother's statement is if your cup isn't full, you have nothing to give. I mean, that's, it's the same as putting the mask on yourself before your kid. It's the same kind of idea. And so it's that constantly not moving so fast that you're not giving yourself the breath to say, where am I? We tend to stay very busy. And again, that's a way of managing anxiety.
I loved all of those answers, thank you. We have a submitted question actually, so I'll read it for you guys. If you could go back to the time when you first started experiencing your anxiety or depression, what piece of advice would you have given to yourself? Or is there anything you would have wanted to handle differently?
I would have not punched so many holes in walls when I was 14, because it's actually a lot of work to fill them up. However, I'm very good at it now. If I could go back though to that version of myself, I would have wished it was the year 2020, and I wished it would have been something I even knew what was going on. For me at the time, kind of like how they were talking about, I grew up in an Egyptian household, very little school. My mom did the same thing when I would have panic attacks in high school before state final soccer games, or before I played on an Olympic development team, before I had to fly to California at the age of 14, I had panic attacks. And I wish at the time I would have known, oh, I'm not crazy. Oh, I'm not I'm a normal person just experiencing something that's bigger than what I know is going on. And I wish at a young age I would have been able to, acknowledge what was going on. And I mean, I was a talkative kid in high school, but knowing about resources, I wish there would have been some in high school when I was younger. I wish my coaches would have given me more I wish my employers would have given me more. You know, when we show up to work about to cry because we're so overwhelmed, I wish I would have had like an employer go, hey, is everything okay? Can I talk to you in the back? And those people exist, but I wish those people would have been present at the time.
I would probably just tell myself you're not crazy. Like what you're feeling is normal for you. And I would have considered researching medications earlier. At least when I was growing up, there was this stigma around, you know, taking anxiety medications, how it would make me a zombie or whatever. I would have told my younger self to be more open with the adults that I trusted and to go to them for help and guidance.
So when I normally see patients in the first session, they'll ask me if I believe in change, because of course they're coming in because they're just having a crisis and they're so worried and they just want to change it. And I don't. I don't, in the sense that the work is to figure out who we are and remove the shame and guilt. So, you know, if somebody has anxiety, they are always going to have anxiety, right? We're not going to get rid of that. And so it's about owning who we are. And I would also argue to that person that that is actually going to be their greatest strength, as well as their greatest weakness, because it is their anxiety that's going to push them to, you know, make sure every T is crossed and every I is dotted, because they're just anxious like that. And so people are actually going to want them on their team. Now, their anxiety is also going to drive them crazy, and so they have to learn to soften it, but they're not going to change it. And so, you know, that kind of question is, it's just coming to terms with who we are and removing the guilt and shame.
I'd like to add something there. This is something me personally I experienced, but like we use the word anxiety a lot. And I think, as you can hear from my tone and stuff, I'm a person who has anxiety, but not the way maybe the two other people on the stage do. So your anxiety is entirely like independent to who you are. My therapist says I have like extroverted anxiety. So like I feel pressure to make sure the room is great. I feel pressure to make sure everyone is happy. I feel pressure in ways other people don't want to. They're so anxious they don't want to go out. I feel like if I don't go out, those anxious people are gonna have an even worse night, so I have to go. You know, I have anxiety that is entirely different from the two people. I could talk to all of you and 50 millionaires and I wouldn't care. But God, if I have a tickle in my throat, I am anxious for hours. You know what I mean? So whatever type of anxiety you have, it is valid and it doesn't have to look like everybody else's. And I think I really wished at a young age I would have known that. Because especially when you hear the word anxious, you think, oh, I would be a timid person, or I'd be someone who doesn't talk a lot, or I'd be someone who does all these things that are associated with that word. And then I realized that, you know what, no, like my version of it's different and that's still valid. So I wish I would have known at a young age that like I'm not crazy, like you said, that I just have a different type of anxiety, or my anxiety comes from different places. So I think it's just like Bonnie was saying, registering who you are and becoming proud of that version of yourself, getting to know that version of yourself, and then just owning it to the best you can. Because I know that there are a ton of famous millionaires, billionaires, people, successful people who go through similar things that we're going through or we think we're going through, and they figure out a way to do it, and it gives me hope to find some type of way that I can do it.
Thank you guys, that's awesome. I actually really related to what you said about how sometimes what we think is our greatest weakness can be our greatest strength. I think a lot of people in this room, they've gone through something and they think that this part of me makes me less of a person or less than the person next to me. But sometimes these hardships and these experiences, these mental illnesses, they make us into really strong people because we're tested and we're pushed to go further. So thank you for mentioning that. We actually have another submitted question. This is from our amazing OT professor. His name is Dr. Alvernia. He's a great professor, I personally think. And he asked, how does the panel feel about the way media, as in TV and movies, portray mental health?
I think media as a whole always comes from a certain point. So to speak on neutrality is so rare nowadays it becomes difficult to even consider, because I'm sure from one perspective, news and media does a phenomenal job portraying parts of, mental health, and then other parts criminalize it and demonize it to a point where like, oh, you're not good enough, or you didn't do this. And I'm sure depending on what network you watch, it's always going to be portrayed one side or the other. This is a super random thing, but if anyone has seen Schitt's Creek, the show is phenomenal, and I think it is one of the very few shows that I've been able to watch. And I have very close friends and family who are part of the LGBTQ community. I myself and tons of people who follow my brand deal with mental health issues. And I think that was one of the first shows I've watched where it was almost utopic. They just acted like every issue was okay, normalized. Let's deal with it, rather than if someone's having a breakdown, if David's freaking out or someone from the show is freaking out, they handled it rather than called them crazy. Rather than talk about LGBT moments where it's like, oh my God, no, it's always supported. And I think that it's just what's really nice about media and TV is we're creating this culture of young people who are getting positions of power to normalize, talking about anything and everything, and mental health being one of those anything. And definitely check out the show, by the way.
It's a great job.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think that TV is, should I keep up? Okay. I think TV is getting a lot better with talking about mental health. I had another point to make. I completely forget, but I agree with everything this man said.
So I was kind of thinking this when you brought up the media question, because I brought up the movie Split, and that's what it's called, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we're talking about mental illnesses, you think of anxiety and depression, and how we can help, not normalize them, but make it easier to talk about them within friends with everyone else. What about the scarier mental illnesses, social identity disorder, people who experience psychosis? How do we go about that and making it not look so scary and portray it in media that way?
So, I met some individuals with schizophrenia. I met one person who reported they have dissociative identity disorder. I don't know if any of that was true, but I met people with pretty serious mental health issues. One of the ways that I found it easier to create space for those individuals to communicate about those darker sides of mental health was to try, at least for me, try to find ways to relate and normalize. So whatever they were feeling in that moment, even if I didn't understand it, I attempted to understand. I asked questions. I communicated with, by inquiring about how it made them feel, maybe what led to that feeling, and if there was anything I could do to help. So I think a big part of creating space for people to talk about those darker parts of mental health is by finding ways to help them realize that it is normal, it's their normal, it might not be your normal, but it is normal for them, and it's okay to talk about it.
And then it's also, right, it's biology, right? There's biochemistry that's going on. And we also know that with trauma now, right? That we've rewired the brain if someone has experienced trauma. And so I think, again, we can connect it, that this isn't some moral, or value problem, but there's actual biochemistry involved, right? Someone is born with without an arm. They have to adapt. And it's the same. And luckily our medications are getting better, and you're seeing people that, aren't nearly as comatose as, some of the movies would have portrayed in the past.
To go along with actually both of what they said, so I'd say, I'm trying to think of the quote, I tried to Google it, but 90% of fear or uncomfortability comes from the unknown. So, to cultivate that to what they said, absolutely for someone who deals with something like that, that's your personal battle. But the more you educate yourself, the more you normalize that into your conversation, the more you just have those difficult conversations, it's gonna dig a couple of times. And it's Malik, I'll call you out. He said he was nervous, for example, about speaking today. But once you do it a couple of times, it becomes habitual, it becomes something you're comfortable with. and you've been killing it, by the way. And I think when you have those difficult conversations, it's gonna stop time one. You're gonna be like, oh, I said it this way, and it makes me feel this. I'm gonna reevaluate, re-educate, and I'm gonna do it again. And as you put that into your environment and your circle, it becomes a safer place. You know, especially people who deal with heavier. As I spoke earlier, I had people in my life who were highly suicidal to the point of attempting it, and I wish I could have been a better person at the time for it. I wish I would have handled those conversations better. But now I feel like as I continue to grow and learn on my own and educate myself, if I have those people come back into my life, I would be able to handle it better. So I think educating yourself just kind of, it's kind of like when you water yourself, the water trickles to the rest of everyone. So I think doing those types of things, it's obviously super difficult at first. And it takes, honestly, a courageous person, a lot more courage than someone who doesn't deal with those type of dark things to even be open about. So I think to acknowledge the courage you have to even deal with your own life is something to be proud of, and to put that to the people around you is also something to be proud of.
Thank you.
Okay, so as a closing question, this is maybe a little fun. It was submitted earlier. How would you handle supporting your own mental health while dating?
Is my girlfriend listening?
I hope, I don't know.
I would actually say that I've gone through a learning curve over the past couple months with this, and I think with dating, it's entirely important to understand that I think the word is you can't be interdependent. Like you are two entirely different human beings, and the agreement to date is not that you owe each other anything. You shouldn't expect anything from the other person. It's dating or being in a relationship is being comfortable and happy with someone that you want to share parts of your life with them. And I think taking dating very seriously in the sense of like you need to be selfish to yourself. If you can't do something, say you can't do it, respect yourself, and then create. Like one issue I had was I would always allocate time I didn't have because I cared about someone, because I thought that showed I cared about them. But then I realized the time I was spending with them was like me being flustered, me being hurried, me being rushed, me being worried about spending money I didn't have. When in actuality, this person would have been much happier just seeing me a couple days later when I was more of a better version of myself. So I think when it comes to dating, to just establish a sense of you, establish a sense of them, and understand that it's a partnership. It's not like I have a girlfriend. You don't have anything. You don't own anyone. They don't owe you anything. And I think also standing up for yourself with that kind of creates a healthy dynamic, and establishing that so early on. Because in the beginning, you feel like, oh, I need to win this person. There's always a settler and a reacher, they say, in a relationship, and that's such an awful stigma. You should never feel like you're settling or reaching. You should be two completely separate people being happy that you're spending time together and enjoying that time. Being present with people, especially when you have a mental health issue. If you can't be present, you're not doing them a service. So that's a lot, probably a little more personal than.
So I did couples therapy this week, but I actually do a lot. And so there's, again, we talk about media, right? There's the famous line, right? You complete me, right? That is such a setup.
That's such a bad line.
Right? Nobody's gonna complete us. Right? The point of being in a relationship, and the more intimate the relationship, the more we're gonna be triggered. And that's the beauty of it. It tells us where we need to grow. Right? We want to blame the other person, but the work is to keep the arrow on itself and realize that when you're going to 0 to 10, oh, okay, this is where I need to go next. This is about me, not about them. But we so often want to make it about them. And so, to your beautiful point, right? It's two separate people. Nobody's completing anybody. Nobody's saving anybody.
You're too young to say anything, man. I want to. I'm sorry.
All right.
Well, thank you guys so much for answering those. Any other closing statements from you guys? Anything you want to present to the viewers here?
So basically, I just want to let anybody know with the mental health illness that better days is coming. Just because you have a mental illness doesn't mean it's the end of it. Life moves on. Just breathe, and everything's gonna be all right. I got you, and I got you.
Alvernia got you. So yeah.
I'm good. This was really fun. It was awesome to come and talk about this. Thank you for having us here. I feel like this was a really important conversation to have. Closing remarks. I guess the only thing I can really think to say is, regardless of what anyone says, it's always a good thing to take care of yourself first and make sure that you're doing okay. And it's okay to be happy about things that are a little weird. It's okay to be excited about things that are a little bit strange. And basically, it's okay to just be yourself, whatever version of yourself makes you happy.
I'm gonna do a shameless plug here for Instagram. Only because I started something that literally was a phrase on a t-shirt, and I've been able to do some really incredible things with people supporting it, and being able to donate money to all sorts of Black Lives Matters and social issue moves, to be able to give kids summer packages in underprivileged homes, giving face masks to foster kids, like just to name a couple. I really appreciate anyone. I know a lot of kids out Alvernia rep the brand. I appreciate that a lot. I know that one thing I did want to add in is that personally, like through myself, I'm trying to collect winter wear for people dealing with homelessness in the encampment center in Philadelphia. I'll be coming to Alvernia 1 or 2 more times. Unfortunately, they've been approved to be there a little bit longer, or they've been approved to be moved into homeless shelter housing, but that's not going to happen soon enough. So along with collecting winter wear for them, I'm helping get I don't know what they're called, but the things that are fire and they keep people warm. Philadelphia got approved for a couple grants, so I'm working with some people on some grants to get them those type of needs. So if you have anything, I'm going to be working. Well, I didn't let you know about this because I got here a little late, but if you wanted to reach out with the brand, DM me. If you wanted to get involved in any shape or form, I'd love to have anyone who just believes in putting an emphasis on mental health and people in need. And I feel like I'm always saying, everyone watching, I'm happy you're alive. Thank you.
Could they be called heaters? Is that what you're thinking?
Heaters is not aggressive enough to fire. Like when you go to the outdoor bar and put fire in it. No, that's a kid.
Tiki torch?
The standing thing. You go to
Space heater?
Like the ones they have at restaurants, like the giant ones. Yeah, those.
What are they called? Space heaters?
I don't know.
A furnace is aggressive.
They're like those giant ones that keep you warm outside.
Yes, I'm trying to get.
I don't know what. Yeah,
At the campus.
those are nice.
In conclusion, Connie, do you have any closing statements?
Thank you for having me, and just get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yes, I like
Someone
that.
said they're space heaters.
Someone in the comments on Zoom says space heaters.
Appreciate that so much. Thank you.
On that note as well, I want to thank everyone for attending, who attended in person, along with people that attended on Zoom. I thought this was a very successful event. You guys were extremely engaging, and I appreciate it so much. On behalf of Active Minds and Black Student Union, we really wanted to bring some voice to campus and really hear what you guys want to hear, and to really start the talk and open the door to talk about mental health and mental health stigma. So I want to thank all of you for that, because you guys are helping do this mission. You guys are engaging in the conversation, which is very important. So as closing remarks, I want to thank everyone on Zoom again. For anyone that's here in person, we have resources in the back at the top right there from Health and Wellness. We also have coloring pages along with some freebies from Rocky over here from I'm Happier Alive. We also have I'm Happier Alive t-shirts if you would like to buy one. So thank you all again for coming, and I hope to see you on campus.
Bye.
Yo, you did it.